All right, let's go ahead and get started. DW 2020-744, Roberto Herrera Villalobos, enter appearance by the state.
Scott Rudy on behalf of the state, Your Honor.
By Raul Lopez.
Raul Lopez on behalf of Mr. Villalobos, Your Honor. We're also invoking the rule this time.
Okay, so by invoking the rule, Officer Marquez and Officer Mirabel Sanchez, my clerk is going to move you into a waiting room. So you'll still be connected. You'll just be in a waiting room until I bring you back to the courtroom, okay? All right. We're working on that. Hang on just a second. But you can bring them before the time limit, right? Do it 15 minutes. Okay, Mr. Lopez, they've been sent to the waiting room. And Mr. Lopez, before we get started, also, Mr. Rohde supplied me with this envelope, and on the front of it, it says Roberto Herrera Villalobos, bench trial, exhibit lists and exhibits, and it has Metro Cross ADA Roby, and it's sealed. I have not opened it, so I have not seen any exhibits prior to their submission. And what I will do is, when Mr. Rohde's introducing them, until I accept it into the case, I won't look at them. All right?
All right. Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Opening statements, Mr. Rohde.
Oh, yes, thank you, Your Honor. And I'm assuming because we have an interpreter, I should speak slowly and just sentence by sentence.
That's correct, and she is interpreting at the moment.
Very good. Your Honor, these are the facts of the case. On April 30th, 2020, here in the city of Albuquerque, County of Bernalillo, State of New Mexico, Deputy Mirabal observed a vehicle failing to maintain its lane. Actually failing to maintain lane over several blocks. Swerving out of lane, almost hitting the deputy's vehicle. Then crossing over the solid white fog line. Leaving the roadway completely, almost striking a street sign. Observing such a vehicle driving in such a manner, the deputy conducted a valid traffic stop. Deputy Mirabal observed several signs of intoxication. And since the deputy was primarily a Spanish speaker, Deputy Mirabal called in a Spanish-speaking deputy, Deputy Marquez. Deputy Marquez arrived on scene shortly same signs of impairment, requested the defendant to exit his vehicle. For some reason, the defendant would not comply after several requests. But when he did exit his vehicle, he lost his balance and needed to hold on to the car for support. The defendant made a double refusal, refusing, when asked, to perform standard field sobriety tests, as well as refusing to offer a breath sample later. These are the facts of the case, Your Honor. Thank you.
Mr. Lopez.
Your Honor, this is a pretty straightforward case. My client was driving. He was not feeling well. He had vomited and he was experiencing some type of medical episode. When he was pulled over by the police, they said that he appeared to be ill. He had vomited. He had vomit on his vehicle, inside the vehicle. He got vomit on his person. He explained to them that he hadn't had anything to drink. And then the officer, the deputy, believed that he saw signs of intoxication. He called a Spanish-speaking officer, deputy. My client explained to them that he was feeling ill, he was feeling sick, that's the reason he got vomited. They didn't believe him. They requested him to do field sobriety tests, and because obviously he was never doing very well physically, and because he had told them that he had been feeling ill and he had not consumed any alcohol, he did not perform any field sobriety tests. He still got arrested. He was taken to the machine, and there was an alleged refusal of the breath test. So that's what they have right now, Judge. They have a gentleman who was not feeling well. He gets pulled over. They see that he's not feeling well. He tells them, I'm not feeling well. I'm not drinking alcohol, but I'm feeling ill. And they see the vomit all over his face and all over his clothing, and they still take him to jail. That's what the case is about right now. Thank you, Alan.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Rody, you can call your first witness.
Well, the state would like to call Deputy Tyler Mirabal.
Okay, we'll bring Mr. Mirabal in. Before we do that, there's time limits on the waiting room. So let me bring both of the deputies in and then send the other deputy back, and we'll put a longer time limit because it'll automatically bring him in without us being able to do that. So why don't you take Deputy Marquez back into the waiting room, but you can pull him sooner than the time frame, right? Yeah. So set him out there for an hour, and then if we need to, we may have to redo it some more. Okay. That way we just have the one deputy in the courtroom. Okay, Mr. Rody, you may proceed.
Oh, thank you, Your Honor. Officer, would you please state your full name for the record?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, sir. Deputy Tyler Sanchez Mirabal, batch number 394.
And Deputy, how are you employed?
Bernalillo County Sheriff's Department.
How long have you been employed in law enforcement with the Sheriff's Department?
3.5 years, sir.
Are you a full-time sworn salaried commissioned police officer?
Yes, sir.
How are you currently assigned?
To the Field Service Division.
Were you on duty on April 30th, 2020?
Yes, sir.
What were your duties on that date?
Just routine patrol and taking calls for service.
What were you wearing on that date?
I was wearing my fully displayed uniform, my badge of office.
And what were you driving on that date?
Fully marked patrol vehicle, Ford Explorer.
And did you come into contact with anyone on that date who appears in the courtroom today?
I can't see anyone on my picture. I just see yourself and I.
Based upon any information that you had gained, how did you identify who you came into contact with?
By him being actually, yeah, I'm sorry. I just was able to scroll there is a subject in the courtroom.
I see. So are you able to see everybody who's in court
Yes, sir.
currently?
Yes, sir. I had to scroll over it. I didn't know I could scroll.
Would you please describe what that individual is wearing? Like what kind of top or shirt?
Yes, sir. He has a blue top on and phone here, wearing a brown mask.
And how would you describe that individual's hair?
Almost bald.
And how would you describe the background of that individual, where he's currently sitting?
He's sitting there. There's books behind him, a cabinet door.
Sorry, Deputy, you were breaking up a little bit.
Yes, sir. So there's cabinets behind him, along with books, doorway, just to the right of him from my screen of view.
Would the court please note that the officer has ID'd the defendant?
The record will reflect he's identified the defendant.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Deputy, where did you come into contact with the defendant?
Initially it was southbound Coors de la Road.
And is that in the city of Albuquerque,
Yes, sir. County of Bernalillo.
state of New Mexico?
Yes, sir.
And what first drew your attention to the defendant?
So as I was traveling southbound on Coors, I observed a silver, I believe it was a Chrysler Sebring. I'd have to refer to my report for the license plate number. Traveling southbound in front of my fully marked patrol vehicle. As I was coming up behind that vehicle, I observed the two left side tires of the vehicle to cross over into the number one lane, as it was traveling in the number 2 lane. I immediately saw them come back into the number 2 lane and continued to travel southbound on Coors. And just due to the license plate being very faded to like a gray tint, I was unable to see the license plate letters and numbers from my distance. So I was able to speed up a little bit, come up to the rear of that vehicle. And as I was coming to the rear of that vehicle, the gray Chrysler actually swerved back into the number 1 lane from the 2 lane, causing me to immediately hit my brakes to avoid crashing into that.
And then what happened next, or what did you next observe, Deputy?
From there, sir, it corrected itself, came back into the number 2 lane, continued to travel southbound on Coors. And again, now at this time, his right side tires crossed over the solid shoulder fog line, white shoulder fog line, 3 times. It was able to correct itself again, come back into the number 2 lane. And after that, that's when the vehicle completely left the roadway with all 4 tires crossing over the solid white fog line, going into the dirt now on basically the side median of the street. It almost crashed into a traffic sign. and then was able to get back onto the roadway again, traveling in the number 2. And that's when I, conducted a traffic stop, engaged my emergency equipment on my fully manned patrol vehicle, and the vehicle came to a stop in the area of Los Padillas and Cougars.
And what happened next after you had both yours and the defendant's vehicle had stopped?
Once they stopped, I exited the patrol vehicle. I approached the driver's side of the defendant's vehicle. I immediately could observe vomit dripping down the driver door. As I came up to the driver window, I looked in the vehicle and there was vomit on the person as well as on the floorboard. As I spoke to the defendant, his speech was slurry. I could observe bloodshot, watery eyes on his person. The vehicle just had a strong odor of alcoholic beverage emitting.
Was there anything else besides what you observed? What did the defendant say?
So there was a language barrier, but I do speak a little bit of Spanish. At this time, just due to the strong odor of alcoholic beverage, the vomit person and I asked for his keys. That's when I believe he handed me his insurance card, and then I asked him again for the key. Finally, gave me the key. And again, like due to full language barrier, I'm not fluent in Spanish. Speak some Spanish. Deputy Marquez was called to the scene to take over the investigation.
I see. And at this time, Your Honor, I'd just like to play a few minutes of a belt tape that
Mr.
is on the
Lopez.
exhibit list.
Mr. Lopez.
Well, Your Honor, if the bell tape is going to be played, it should be played in its entirety, not just a few minutes.
That's fine. It's less than 8 minutes long.
Is that fine, Mr. Lopez?
Sure.
All right.
Obviously, I'm not expecting the interpreter to interpret the tape.
Okay. Did you understand that? All right.
Let's see if I can get this going, Your Honor. And let me just play a few seconds to make sure that everybody can hear it. Is that audible to the court?
I don't think it's playing. There you go.
Is that audible now?
You didn't play enough. I did.
No,
We didn't.
okay.
I did not hear anything.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let me play a little bit more and then lay a bit of foundation for it.
Okay. It is not coming through.
You're not hearing anything?
No, sir. Neither am I.
You may have to turn up the volume on your end, Mr. Rody.
Okay, I'll do that. Does that help?
No.
Did that? No? Oh, no. Well, then I'm not sure how to make that audio anymore. I've played it and it seems to be working fine. I can hear it, but the court and nobody else can. So in the effort, in the interest of efficiency, the bell tape is just pretty much duplicative of what the deputy testified to.
Hang on just a second. Ellie says if you're going to share the screen again, to remind you that there's 2 boxes at the bottom of the screen that you have to check off in order for it to be audible.
Sure, it's the share.
Right before you have to share your screen, there's 2 boxes that you have to check off according to Ellie
Oh, okay.
at the bottom of your screen.
On the left or the right?
Be on the left-hand side to you at the bottom. Why don't you come up here and tell them that?
Hey, Scott. So when you click on share screen, do you see the 2 boxes?
Oh, yes, it says, yeah. And
Yeah,
I
so
learned
that's
that
gonna
in
allow
training. And check both of them, right?
Yes, check both of them off and then the audio should work.
Okay, thanks. And I had
Okay.
learned that in training too, sorry.
It's okay, it's easy to forget.
I'll turn the volume down a little bit.
Joking, baby, I'm terrified. You're the guy.
0436, I'm gonna divert for 54.
Is that working now, folks?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. Deputy Mirabal, do you recognize that the audio,
Yes, sir.
and where is it coming from?
My vehicle.
Okay, and if I play a little bit more, will you recognize the time?
Yes, sir.
Be Corey de Los Padilla, Mexico 849, Robert Frank Zebra, on a silver Chrysler, vehicle almost hit me in his.
Sure you mute me.
Has so far from what you've heard, has this audio been altered in any way?
No, sir.
Would you say that it's an accurate audio of your belt tape on the date of the incident, April
Yep.
30th, 2020?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And as I said, this is less than a total 8 minutes long.
Telling to maintain lanes.
Corey de los Padilla.
So did you throw up all over yourself?
Yeah,
Yeah?
yeah.
Okay, you mind handing me the keys? No, I didn't say the registration and insurance, I said the keys. Go ahead and give me the keys to the vehicle. Hand them to me. The car is in park, you're okay. I'm Deputy Maribel with the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Department. Now, do you have your license, registration, and proof of insurance?
No.
Okay, do you have your license? So why do you have throw up all over your door?
What?
Why do you have throw up all over your door?
No, I don't know.
You don't know?
No.
There's that. You have registration for your vehicle? Registration?
No.
No? Okay. ¿Cuántas cervezas?
No, nothing.
Don't lie to me.
No, nothing.
I could smell it from the vehicle.
No.
I could smell it coming off your breath as you're speaking to me. You almost hit me. You've been failing to maintain lanes for the past 4 blocks.
No.
Yeah. You went completely off the road. You hit the dirt right here a couple times.
No.
Both right side of your tires have crossed over this solid white line at least 3 to 4 times.
The house.
You're going to the house?
Yes.
Okay, where's that at? Where do you live? Where do you live? Where's that? Where's that? I can read, but where's it at? Okay. Stay in the vehicle for me. Don't get out. Do you understand me?
Sube el teléfono.
Eso.
Toma tu teléfono ya en el asiento. ¿Qué pasó? Nada. ¿Saben por qué lo pararon? ¿No saben? No podía mantener su carril. ¿Sabe eso? Sí. ¿De dónde viene? ¿Pero de dónde viene? ¿Dónde? ¿Qué trabaja? ¿Ya para su casa? ¿Dónde vive? 23 Cruces, Luz. Bueno, ¿ha tomado bebidas alcohólicas esta noche? Nada. ¿Por qué se basteó aquí? Se siente mal. Ya después de hacer unas pruebas, si está bien usted para manejar. No, no quiere. Salga del carro, por favor. Por favor. ¿Me oye? Salga del carro, por favor. No. Quiero hablar con usted acá. Ahorita no. Ahorita no. ¿Qué no entiende? ¿Tiene problemas? Entonces hágame caso. Simplemente le estoy diciendo que se venga el carro para hablar con usted acá afuera. ¿Qué no entiende?
Sí, entiendo, oficial. Sí, entiendo, oficial.
¿Y qué es el problema entonces? ¿Por qué no sale? ¿Quiere que lo saque yo?
Sáqueme.
Bueno. Salga, por favor. Salga, por favor.
Sáqueme.
Salga, por favor. Venga para acá atrás. Venga para acá atrás. Hágase acá. No meta las manos en la bolsa. ¿Por qué tienen los ojos rojos?
No sé, está trabajando en carpintería, es carpintero.
¿Por qué tiene el olor usted que se ha tomado?
No ha tomado, pues.
¿No ha tomado?
Sí.
¿Cuánto? ¿Qué
No
tomó?
tomó.
¿Qué tomó?
¿Quiere arrésteme, oficial?
Estoy hablando con usted.
Pues sí, arrésteme si quiere.
¿Qué tomó esta noche?
Nada.
Nada. Entonces, ¿por qué huele alcohol? Como se ha tomado. Está todo basqueado.
Vamos, hasta que sienten.
¿No ha tomado alcohol? ¿Seguro? Entonces lo voy a preguntar una vez más. ¿Está usted dispuesto a hacer pruebas?
No,
Para determinar si usted está bien para manejar.
no.
¿No quiere? ¿Qué hace? He doesn't want to do fields.
Yeah.
Venga para acá.
Ones that we found, and we don't see any damage on those.
394 and Chasey.
In your honor, that's the bell tape in its entirety.
All right.
Deputy Mirabal, was there anything else you wanted to add that you haven't testified to about either what the defendant said or what you observed?
No objection, Your Honor. That's an improper question.
I'll withdraw the
I'll
question.
sustain that. Thank
I'll
you.
withdraw the question. Nothing further from the state on direct.
Cross-examination, Mr. Lopez.
Sure, Deputy Mirabal, you stated that you spoke some Spanish, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, but the only thing I hear from your interaction with my client is about cervezas, right?
Yes, sir.
You say cuántas cervezas, right?
Yep.
Is that the extent of your Spanish?
No, I know more, but like I said, I'm not fluent.
Okay,
That's why
because you know what? Because you asked cuántas cervezas, and he told you nada, right?
Yes.
And what does nada mean?
Nothing.
Okay, so he told you, in fact, he didn't consume any alcohol, right?
Yes, sir.
And then when you asked him about the keys, you wanted to get the keys from the vehicle. He did not understand what you said, right?
He understand the second time.
Okay, but you still asked him in English, right?
Yes, but he understood the second time.
Okay. Well, why didn't you talk to him in the best Spanish that you had that night?
Because, like I said, I didn't know
it-
he was a Spanish speaker. The quick interaction with him, I assumed he spoke English.
Okay. But you know, did you take the keys from him?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and did you actually take the keys from the ignition, or did he actually give them to you?
No, he gave them to me, and they were placed on top of
On top of where?
the hood.
Okay. So you took possession of the keys then?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you kept asking him about the driver's license, registration, and insurance, right?
Yes, sir.
And it seemed like he had a hard time understanding what you were saying.
He gave me everything except the registration, so he understood that.
Okay. But you still felt that you needed a Spanish speaker there, right?
Again, yes, that's why Deputy Marquez was called to.
Okay. Now, did Deputy Marcus show up right away?
No, sir. It took him a couple minutes to get there.
Okay. It seems like, was that your tape that we heard?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So would it be fair to say that you were present when we were listening to the Spanish conversation between with Deputy Marquez and my client?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So your tape captures some of the conversation that they were having. Would you agree?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. And did you ask him more than one time? I only heard one time about how many cervezas he had consumed, right?
Yes, sir.
You only asked him one time?
I believe so.
Okay. And his answer to you was nothing, right?
Yes.
Now, he did appear to be having some vomit on his person, right?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember he told you that he was actually feeling physically ill?
No.
Okay. How would you have asked him in Spanish that, whether he's not feeling well?
I would ask him if he needs medical.
Oh, okay, but how would you say that? I mean, I heard how you said cuántas cervezas, right? But how would you say, are you not feeling well, or are you feeling okay, or are you in need of medical?
Objection, Your Honor. The deputy has testified that his Spanish is not very fluent.
I'll overrule the objection. I think Mr. Lopez is asking if how he would have asked him in Spanish, but I don't know that he did or not, but I think Mr. Lopez is asking how he would have communicated that. So go ahead, Mr. Lopez.
Thank you, Anna. So what about that, officer or deputy? Would you be able to ask him if he was not feeling well?
Just say, ¿tienes medical? Or necesita medical?
Okay. You didn't ask that question, did you?
No, sir.
Okay. You asked for the police officer, for the deputy to come, and Deputy Marcus showed up, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and Deputy Marcus conducted the rest of the investigation, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Would it be fair to say that you just set aside your observations and you allowed Deputy Marcus to conduct the investigation after that?
I'm sorry, what was your first part of your question?
Would you agree with me that based on the tape, it appears that Deputy Marcus showed up and he's the one that started continue the investigation with my client?
Yes, sir. That's why he was called.
Okay. Did you do anything else?
I was just there for backup at that point.
Okay. Did you call for the tow truck?
Yes, sir. The tow was called to the scene.
Okay. Okay. I don't have any other questions. Thank you very much.
And if I may, I just realized that I did not swear in the officer, so I'm going to swear him in and ask him if the testimony he's provided is true to the best of his ability. That way I can make sure it's a sworn statement. Officer Mirabal Sanchez, do you solemnly swear affirm the testimony you just provided to the court is true to the best of your knowledge and belief under penalty of perjury?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. All right, Mr. Rohde, any redirect?
I just had one question, Your Honor. I'll be brief. Deputy Mirabal, when you were interacting with the defendant by yourself before the arrival of Deputy Marquez, about how long were you interacting with the defendant? Just an approximation.
Maybe 2 to 3 minutes. Just that quick interaction of asking about the vomit, going back to my vehicle.
Let me just pause a second. Oh, go ahead. Are y'all okay? Mr. Villalobos, are you understanding what's being said? And can you hear?
Judge, can I take a quick break to make sure that he's doing okay?
Sure.
Thanks, Ellie, for your help.
Sorry, Judge, I think we have a better communication now. The speaker on the interpreter was very low.
Okay, and I think the interpreter's trying to talk to him now, but he's not responding, so they're trying to make sure we've got communication.
Well, he was originally on his cell phone.
Okay,
and
he can hear
switched
now.
him- Okay, I switched him to a regular line, so.
Oh, perfect. Okay. And you were in cross-examination, Mr. Rhodey?
Yes.
I'm sorry, redirect.
Redirect. I just had a quick follow-up question for Deputy Mirabal. How fair is it to say that in 2 or 3 minutes, you realize that the defendant was primarily a Spanish speaker and you needed a Spanish-speaking officer to continue or take over the investigation?
Yeah, that's why I called him. I mean, I could tell after that he spoke Spanish only, or
Okay, thank you, Deputy. No further questions, Your Honor.
Anything further, Mr. Lopez?
No, Your Honor.
Does Deputy Mirabal Sanchez need to be excused, or do I need to reserve him in a waiting room?
As far as I know, I think he can be excused, Your Honor.
I believe that he
Okay,
can be excused.
Mr. Lopez?
Also,
Okay, yes, Deputy Mirabal Sanchez, you can go ahead and hang up. We're not going to put you into a waiting room, so the state's done with you for the time being.
okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy.
Unless you want to hang into the courtroom, I guess you can hang in there because you wouldn't be sequestered. So if you want to stay in, I guess that's fine too.
No, shift is really busy right now, so my guys are taking calls, so I'm gonna help them out.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Have a good one.
Okay. Mr. Rhodey, you may call your next witness.
Oh, thank you, Your Honor. The state would like to call Deputy Valente Marquez.
All right. All right, it looks like Deputy Marquez is on the line. Deputy Marquez, would you raise your right hand? You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give will be the truth, nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury?
Yes.
All right, you may proceed, Mr. Rhodey.
Thank you, Your Honor. Deputy, would you please state your full name for the record?
Deputy Valente Marquez.
And how are you employed?
I'm employed with the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Department. Full time.
And are you a sworn salaried commission peace officer?
Yes, sir.
How are you currently assigned?
I'm currently assigned to the field services.
And were you on duty on April 30th, 2020?
Yes, sir.
And what were your duties on that date?
That date I was assigned to the South Area Command graveyard shift for patrol.
What were you wearing on that date?
I was wearing my full uniform, displaying my badge of office, driving a fully marked Sheriff's Department vehicle.
And did you come into contact with anybody on that date who was in the courtroom currently?
Yes, came into contact with the gentleman that is on the screen right now, wearing a blue shirt.
And could you further describe that individual?
It was a Hispanic male. Today he's wearing a blue shirt.
What would you comment about the length of his hair?
It is shaved short.
And how would you describe the background that's behind him?
Appears to be in an office, I believe, from what it looks like to me.
And what would you say is in the office behind him?
There's a cabinet, some cabinetry with the closed door. He's on the phone right now, listening in, wearing a face mask.
Would the court please note that the officer has identified the defendant?
The record will reflect he's identified Roberto Herrera Villalobos.
And Deputy, where did you come into contact with the defendant?
Well, I came into contact with him on April 30th of this year. It was before midnight at 7200 block of Coors Boulevard.
And is that in the city of Albuquerque?
Yes, city of Albuquerque, Bernalillo County, state of New Mexico.
And what were the circumstances that you first came into contact with the defendant?
The circumstances were as I went to assist Deputy Maribal on a traffic stop, which he was out with the male subject that was a Spanish speaker. So I went to assist him on a traffic stop.
I see. And what, if anything, did you observe about the defendant upon making contact?
After I arrived and I made contact with Deputy Maribal, he told me the reason why he had stopped the vehicle. He also told me that he had observed signs of intoxication on the driver. I then went up and made contact with the driver, Mr. Villalobos, who was in the driver's seat. Upon contact with him, I smelled odor of alcoholic beverages coming from inside the vehicle, and I also observed throw up on the door and center console area. I then asked the driver in Spanish. Conversation took place in Spanish. I asked him if he knew why he was stopped. It didn't appear that he did know why he was stopped, so I told him that he failed to maintain his lane, and which was the reason why he was stopped. I then asked him where he was going to, where he was coming from. He said he was headed home from work. I then asked if he had anything to drink tonight. He said he hadn't. I then asked why I was smelling, why it smelled like alcoholic beverages. He just didn't have an answer for that. And then asked him why there was throw up on the door and in the vehicle. He told me that he was feeling sick. From there, I asked him why his eyes were red. He said his eyes were red because he was a carpenter and was headed home from work. I then asked if he was willing to do some standardized field sobriety tests. He said no. At that point, I asked if he was. I asked him to step out of the vehicle in order to speak to him some more. Out of the vehicle, I wanted to remove him from the vehicle in order to determine that the odor of alcoholic beverages wasn't coming from just inside the vehicle and not his person. When I asked him to step out, he kind of just sat there. I asked him, "Did you hear me? You understand?" And he said he did. And I said, "Well, are you gonna get out?" He said he didn't want to. I then asked him he could either get out or I would take him out of the car. And he said, "Well, take me out of the car." So then at that point, I opened the door. I asked him politely to please step out of the car. He then repeated for me to remove him from the car. As I reached over to ask him, as I reached over to him, he then on his own got out of the car and then asked him to step behind the vehicle. He walked over to the rear where he lost his balance and had to use his right hand to stop himself from falling into the back trunk. Once he regained his balance, I then asked him again if he had anything to drink tonight. He said no. Then I again asked him well, why does he smell like he's been drinking? He didn't have an answer for that. I then asked if he was willing to do some standardized field sobriety tests again. He again said he didn't want to do any. At that point, based on everything I had seen and observed, and I placed him under arrest. I then escorted him to the back seat of my vehicle, where I continued my conversation with him. I asked Mr. Villalobos first if I explained to him that he was under arrest for DWI and went on to read the New Mexico Implied Consent Advisory to him.
Pardon me, your deputy. Did you start into the implied consent advisory while the defendant was in your vehicle, or did that happen later after driving to the substation?
No, that happened there on scene. Once I had taken him to the back seat of my vehicle and he had sat down, I then explained to him that he was under arrest for DWI, and then went on to read the implied consent advisory to him there on scene.
Let me interrupt you just briefly.
Go ahead.
How did you communicate the implied consent advisory to the defendant?
I read it to him verbatim from the card I carry in Spanish. So I basically just read it to him. Once I read it to him, he said he refused to submit to a breath sample. So after he said he wouldn't submit to a breath sample, I then read him the refusal section, just explaining to him that the consequences for refusing. Once I read him that refusal section, I asked if he was willing at that point if he was willing to submit to a breath test, and he refused again. He did say that he didn't understand, so I did end up reading it to him twice, and still got the same answer that he did not want to submit to a breath test.
That second reading, Deputy, excuse me, on that second reading, did the defendant appear to understand what you had read him from the card, the implied consent advisory?
Yes, sir.
And why or how do you believe that he understood?
Because I believe I asked him if he understood, and for my memory, he did not. Well, he did not again say like, "Oh, I still don't understand." He said he understood to me from what I remember, and he also elicited the same response that he didn't want to submit to a breath sample.
Was the defendant advised of his right to have an independent test?
Yes, sir.
Did the defendant give any reason or condition for refusing to provide a breath sample?
He did not.
Did the defendant refuse by actions or words?
He verbally said he didn't want to submit to a breath test.
And did you explain the consequences of that refusal?
Yes, sir, I did.
And what are the consequences of refusing to submit to a breath test?
Basically that he would be subject to losing his license for a year, his driving privileges, and that he would possibly face greater, more severe sentencing if found guilty for DWI.
After this conversation, at any later point, did the defendant reconsider and request to take a breath or a blood sample?
No, so after that, I did check his mouth just in case he changed his mind after we left, and after I would transport him to the prison transport center. So after I left the scene with him in my custody, we went to the PTC where I did start an intoxilizer, sat him next to it, and he did not at any point recant his refusal. So it was kind of a moot point then doing the checking his mouth and starting the deprivation period.
Sure, understood. No further questions for direct, Your Honor.
Deputy, may I, Your Honor? May I proceed?
Yes, yeah, your witness, Mr. Lopez.
Yes, I'm just asking for Your Honor for his permission to proceed.
Sure.
Thank you, Your Honor. Deputy, you've been called to translate before, right?
Yes, sir.
And you're a Spanish speaker?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you're required to have a belt tape, right?
Yes, sir.
Did you have a belt tape on this night?
Yes, sir.
Did you tag that belt tape into evidence?
I believe I did.
Do you know what is the reason for us not getting your belt tape?
No, I had no idea you did not have it.
Okay. Now, let me ask you, when you get there, you see my client, and how long did it take for you to notice that he was a Spanish speaker?
How long did it take for me to notice?
Yeah, or to know?
Pretty much immediately, because I started off the conversation in Spanish and he responded to me and understood everything I was saying. So,
well, you were able to communicate with him pretty well.
yes, sir.
And you asked him whether he had anything to drink, right?
Yes.
And he told you no.
Correct.
And you asked him that question several times, didn't you?
Yes.
And every single time that you asked him, he consistently told you that no, he hadn't, right?
From what I remember, that's correct.
Okay. And by that time that you got there, I believe that Deputy Mirabal had in his possession my client's keys to the vehicle. Do you recall that?
That I don't remember if he had taken his keys or not. I know typically when it comes to a DWI investigation, the initial deputy usually has the driver turn the vehicle off, hand him his keys, and ends up putting them on the top of the car or on the bed of the truck or whatever it may be.
Okay.
But
now, when you get there, you notice that there's some vomit on my client.
Yes, on the vehicle.
Is it just on the vehicle or also on my client?
From my report, from what I read, I noted that there was vomit on the door and on the center console. Just from my memory, I don't remember if there was actually if there was actual vomit on his person. So I don't remember 100% if it was on him.
Okay.
but it was for sure on the door and the center console.
Now, did it appear to be, and I hate to ask you this question, did it appear to be fresh vomit?
Yes.
And I hate to ask you this question, but I'm assuming that you have smelled fresh vomit before.
Yes.
Okay, what does it smell like?
I mean, it just depends on whatever the contents are, whether it's just food or liquids, or in this case, food with probably alcoholic odors, which is why it was a strong odor.
Okay, but you're not sure about that, are you?
Well, of course not. I don't know exactly what was in it.
Okay, but vomit has a very uh, distinct taste and a distinct smell, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't presume to know that it all tastes and smells the same, but it's pretty gross.
Okay, it's not pleasant, right?
No.
The last thing you want to do as a person is to be vomiting, right?
Yes, of course.
Okay. And when you got there, Mr. Herrera Villalobos told you that he was feeling ill, wasn't he? Did he tell you that?
Yeah, when I asked him why there was throw up, he said he was feeling sick, is what he told me.
Okay. And did you do anything about that? The fact that somebody's telling you that he's feeling ill?
No.
Okay. Okay. So how did you ask him if he wanted to do field sobriety test? How would you ask him in Spanish?
You want me to tell you in Spanish?
Well, what would you use? What wording would you use to say, hey, I'm going to conduct some standardized field sobriety test on you?
I would say that if he was willing to do some pruebas. Yeah.
Okay, pruebas. That would be the word that you would use?
Yes. One of the words.
Do you have any other words?
Well, I would say if he was willing to do some pruebas para determinar if he was okay to drive, basically.
And that's when you said that he said no?
Yes.
Okay. And you're saying that you explained to him the breath test, and he also said no.
Yeah, so when I asked him if he was willing to do some tests for me to make sure he was okay to drive, he said no. So from there, I basically asked him to step out of the car so I can talk to him some more outside the vehicle. And then, like I said, my whole reason that I wanted to do that was I wanted to separate him from the inside of the car to get him away from that odor, to make sure that it wasn't coming from his person and not something else in the car. Okay. So then he basically said no, he didn't want to get out. I then said, well, if you don't want to get out, I'm going to take you out. He then said, well, take me out. So then I opened his door and I asked him again, get out of the car. And he said again, take me out. So when I was going to reach over to basically escort him out of the car, he got out on his own.
Okay. All righty. So how many times do you think you asked him if he had anything to drink?
At least 2 times for sure.
And
once while he was in the car, and then I did ask him, well, why do you smell like alcohol? But he didn't give me a response or an excuse or anything like that to explain that. And then the second time I know I asked him again was once he was out of the car, and we were standing behind his car. I asked him again because I could still smell the odor of alcoholic beverages coming from his person. I asked him again, well, why you sure you haven't had anything to drink tonight? And he said no. I then asked him again, well, why do you smell like you've been drinking? And he just didn't have an answer for that.
Okay. And how many times did he tell you that he was not feeling well?
Once. Only when I asked him about when he was in the car and I asked him about the throw up, he told me he was sick. So then once we were out of the car, he never brought up the fact that he was sick again. I did bring up the fact that, well, you smell like alcohol. You threw up. Like, are you sure you haven't been drinking? And he just said no. So like he never brought up the fact that he was feeling sick again, just the one time initially.
Okay. And let me ask you, based on your training and experience, do you only throw up when you're feeling intoxicated or when you're feeling sick?
There could be a lot of reasons. Drinking is obviously one reason a lot of people throw up, especially late at night.
But it's not the only reason, right?
Oh, no.
Objection, Your Honor. The deputy is not a medical personnel. This is kind of beyond the scope of his normal knowledge.
I would agree with that, Your Honor, but I asked him about his expertise and his training. So I believe that he's talking about his training and expertise. Judge, I couldn't hear your ruling.
They had me on mute. It was overruled. I allowed the question.
Thank you, Your Honor. Officer, I don't have any other questions. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Mr. Rhodey, redirect.
I just had one question. Deputy, when the defendant reported being sick, did he say why he was sick at all? Or did he tell you any medical condition that was making him sick at the time?
No, he didn't elaborate on that point other than he just was feeling sick, and I guess that was his explanation to why he threw up.
Okay, thank you, Deputy. No further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Lopez?
Yeah, just one question, Your Honor. When, may I proceed with that one question?
Sure.
Thank you. Now, officer, when I believe that I asked you, what did you do when he told you that he was feeling ill, and you told me you didn't do anything about it, did you?
No, I did not.
Okay, I have no other questions. Thank you.
Anything further, Mr. Rhodey?
Nothing further from the state.
Do we need to reserve Officer Marquez, or can we release him?
I think he can be released.
Mr. Lopez?
He can be released, Your Honor.
Okay, Deputy, you're welcome to either stay to the end of the trial, or you can go ahead and log off.
Okay, I'll listen and I'll mute myself.
All right, thank you. Mr. Rhodey, you may call your next witness.
The state has no further witnesses, Your Honor.
State rests?
State rests.
Okay, Mr. Lopez?
We also rest, Your Honor.
Okay. Closing arguments, Mr. Rhodey?
Well, thank you, Your Honor. Well, as Deputy Mirabal proffered in his testimony, he observed very visibly the defendant failing to maintain his lane over the course of several blocks, swerving, almost hitting his own vehicle, driving off the road, almost hitting a traffic sign. And Deputy Mirabal had reasonable suspicion to initiate a traffic stop based upon that kind of driving. Both Deputy Mirabal and Deputy Marquez noticed and observed signs of intoxication that included bloodshot, watery eyes, a strong odor of alcohol, slurred speech, that Deputy Marquez noticed even when the defendant had exited his vehicle and was standing behind it. When asked to perform any standardized field sobriety tests, the defendant refused. He had also refused several requests to comply to exit his vehicle. And when he did comply and exited the vehicle on his own, the deputy testified that he lost his balance and needed the vehicle for support. He refused standard field sobriety tests a second time, and also refused at least 2, if not 3 requests to provide a breath sample. These are the facts of the case, Your Honor, and based upon both deputies' observations, the refusal, the inability of the defendant to respond and have an answer for why he smelled of alcohol, and why he was swerving, all point to the fact of intoxication, impairment while driving, and the state would request the court to find the defendant guilty of aggravated driving while under the influence, a first offense, and failure to maintain lane. Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Lopez.
Oh, Your Honor, thank you. This case, I believe, represents the problem that we have sometimes with DWI. You notice some strange or unusual driving, and the first thing that the officer thinks is he must be intoxicated. And that is not always the case. Obviously, my client is coming from work. He tells that to the officers. He gets pulled over because failure to maintain lane. There's a lot of reasons why there was a failure to maintain lane. And one was the fact that he was vomiting. He was throwing up inside the vehicle. It's been a while since I have vomited, but I can appreciate the fact that it's not a pleasant experience. Vomit sometimes it's usually very violent, and it comes when you're not expecting it, and it comes and it gets into your nose, and you can just imagine, if you have a bucket or a toilet next to you, that makes it a little more pleasant. But when you're inside your own vehicle trying to get home and not feeling well, and all of a sudden it comes through your mouth and your nose, and it gets all over the car, and then the police officer pulls you over. He doesn't understand much Spanish, but he has enough sense to say the typical that the police officer would ask, ¿Cuántas cervezas? Meaning, how many beers? And my client says, none, but I'm feeling ill, I'm feeling sick. Look at the vomit that is all over me. And the police officer continues on this road that it must be intoxication. What else could it be? And with that said, he calls the second officer that my client tells him, I'm not feeling well, I'm ill. And I asked the officer, what did you do when he tells you, I'm not feeling well, I'm ill? And he says, nothing. And it's like, well, is that the training that you obtained at this 6-month academy? The fact that the person who just pulled over is telling you that he's ill and he's not feeling well, and you don't do anything. And not only does he doesn't do anything, he keeps asking the same question. How many beers have you had? And my client keeps saying, none, I'm not feeling well. And then the officer claims that that he smells an odor of an alcoholic beverage. I hate to say this, but you know, the odor of an alcoholic beverage, I believe it's in everybody's vomit, because there's the acid that comes from the stomach, and it gets involved with whatever you have consumed, that makes it very unpleasant to smell. And these officers can not only smell the vomit, but according to them, can smell the alcoholic beverage, which is very interesting to me. And then not only that, but before that, they take the keys away so he would not be able to go anywhere. Not that he was, but that appears to be a seizure at that point. In any event, Judge, you have a poor gentleman going home late at night, feeling sick, who has a misfortune of vomiting inside his vehicle because of the level of illness that he's experiencing. And then you get two officers who believe that the only reason that he would be ill for is because he drank too much. But by the same token, when I asked the officer, when you got to speak to him in Spanish, were you able to communicate well with him? And he said, yes, he understood everything I was saying. And that takes away the intoxication issue. If my client is able to understand everything that the police officer is saying to him, obviously he's not intoxicated. Now, the fact that he ignores the fact that the police officers, both of them, ignore the fact that my client is telling him, I'm not feeling well, I'm ill, that gives a reason why, you know, when they ask him, we're going to give you some pruebas, and I don't know about pruebas, if that's the best word, but to see whether you're intoxicated, my client says no. You know, and when he says, you know, do you want to blow into this machine? He says no. Why did he say no? Because he was not intoxicated. He was obviously not feeling well that day, Judge. And there is, as much as the state wants to argue about this, there is nothing that would suggest that my client smelled like alcohol or that he was in fact drinking. There is nothing that suggests that. I mean, it's not like they found a bottle of tequila next to him. It's not. I mean, they didn't. If they would have all obviously told you about it. The failure to maintain lane was associated with the fact that he was not feeling well. He was feeling ill. He was throwing up inside the car. But there's 1,000 reasons why somebody would throw up. In that, 1,000 reasons does not really include alcohol. And for those reasons, Judge, I would ask you to find my client not guilty on all charges. Thank you.
Mr. Rhodey?
Well, thank you, Your Honor. There seems to be no indication that the deputy, either one, just jumped to a conclusion that the defendant was intoxicated without having made several observations of intoxication. The defendant never said he was sick for any particular reason. He just said he was sick. A reasonable inference is that he was sick because he had drunk too much, and the smell of alcohol was both from the defendant and from his vomit. There's no evidence that defense has showed no evidence that the defendant suffers from any condition in which he might have a seizure. That just seems to be pure speculation. So the state would still maintain that the officers had reasonable suspicion to stop the defendant, and that to place him in custody for several signs of intoxication, non-compliance, and really being unable to offer a reasonable explanation for sickness or illness or bad driving or the smell of alcohol. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. In viewing the facts of the case, I do note that the the first deputy, followed the defendant for a period of time. During that period of time, he crossed the lane. At one point in time, he actually went off the road, almost striking a road sign before he came back on. My thought process is that if he was vomiting, he would have been vomiting throughout that period of time. Why wouldn't he have pulled over and taken care of himself versus putting himself or anybody else at risk? And that doesn't jive with the fact that he's just ill. In that, secondly, is that both officers noticed an odor of alcohol. And I do note that the first officer, Officer Sanchez Mirabal, he noticed the odor of alcohol while the defendant was sitting in the vehicle. So it could have come from the vehicle for other reasons. But the second officer, deputy, noticed that the strong odor of alcohol while he was outside the vehicle. Also noted the fact that Mr. Mirabal Villalobos had problems standing and actually fell and had to catch himself. The court is going to find that the defendant was impaired to the slightest degree, and I'm going to find him guilty on both charges. Do we want to go to sentencing, or do you want me to request a PSR?
We can go to sentencing, Your Honor.
Okay. Let me pull that up. Oops. Mr. Ruddy, were you okay to go to sentencing?
Yes, that's fine, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. Villalobos, I have found you guilty of driving while under the influence of intoxicating liquor, drugs, and failure to maintain lane. The sentences are run consecutive to each other. That sentence is deferred for a period of 1 year. I'm sorry, I'll run them concurrent to each other. The sentence is deferred for a period of 1 year, and you'll be placed on supervised probation. You'll have to attend and complete the DWI school. You'll complete the Metropolitan Court alcohol and drug screening. If it determines you need additional counseling, you'll do that counseling. You'll attend the Victims Impact Panel. You'll not possess or consume any alcohol or illegal drugs. You'll be randomly tested to make sure that you're in compliance. You must have an ignition lock license and an ignition lock device installed on any vehicle that you drive. That requirement is for a period of 1 year. You'll have to complete 24 hours of community service. No violations of federal, state, or local criminal law while this case is pending. You will follow all orders of the court and all orders of probation. There's mandatory court costs and fees that need to be paid. You can do additional community service for those court costs and fees. Probation costs, Mr. Lopez?
Judge, I would ask you to waive those if he's going to counsel.
Sure. Mr. Rhodey?
State has no objection to that waiver, Your Honor.
Okay, I'll waive probation costs as long as there's no violations. Mr. Lopez, did Mr. Villalobos spend any time in jail?
I believe that he spent the 2 days, Judge.
Okay, I'll give you, Mr. Villalobos, I'll give you $116 credit against your court costs and fees, so that'll reduce that down. And Mr. Lopez, do you want me to issue a zero bond for a purpose of appeal and delay this for 15 days?
I don't think that would be necessary, Your Honor.
Okay, all right. All right, anything further?
Nothing. Are you going to provide those documents via mail, or are you want me to print them out?
No, what I'll do is I'll send we'll send the sentencing order via mail to both you and to your client. And if he will call customer service at 841-8151, they should be able to tell him how to do the screening online. You can also do the DWI school online, I believe. I'm not sure about the Victims Impact Panel. I think you can now do that one online. In addition to that, they can show him how to pay his court costs and fees online. and they will also tell him what agencies are available for community service.
Okay.
All right? Anything further?
Nothing else, Your Honor. Thank you.
Not from the
All
state,
right.
Your Honor.
All right, this trial is over. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, Your Honor.